Have you ever wondered what has happened to the United States and its once vibrant culture? Have you ever wondered why a virtuous American culture has been in decay for over 60 to 70 years? The book Deus Ex Machina, God from the Machine, explains how foreign belief systems have been imported into the United States by foreign intellectual agents to be used to fundamentally transform the most prosperous and free nation in the world into a typical third world country. Learn how the progressive academics, progressive activists, large corporations, and the mainstream media have become appendages of the federal government, a Praetorian Guard, and an extension of the political vanguard class. Deus Ex Machina exposes the cogs of the machine that progresses our civil society to chaos and subjugation. Get this tool to educate others and illuminate the truth on the battlefield of ideas. Let's make a difference. Get Deus Ex Machina, the progression of secular socialism, from Amazon.com and Lulu.com today.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Are you getting a TV picture now, Houston? Neil, yes, we are getting a TV picture. You're in our field of view now. Okay, ready for me to come up? All set. Okay, I'm on the top step. It's a very simple matter to hop down from one step to the next. You get 3 more steps and then along. Okay, I'm going to leave that 1 foot up there and both hands down about the 4th rung up.
Roger that. 10 miles is back on my nose. Watch one again.
And we say to our nation tonight, we say to our government, we even say to our FBI, we will not be harassed. We will not make a butchery of our conscience. We will not be intimidated, and we will be heard.
6 miles, 6 miles. Rally 2, rally 2. Turning into me. Roger that. 12 miles. 4 miles. Taking right. Roger that. Good throw, good throw. Coming hard, stop.
Shoot him! I haven't got time.
Got the second one.
I got the second one on the nose right now.
Hey, I'm high cover on you.
Lock him up.
Thank you.
Lock him up.
Hello, folks. Chris Pilier, Lanterns Media Network, and the Liberty Eagle want to thank you for joining us on the battlefield tonight. Got a great show lined up for you as usual. Got a special guest tonight, Mr. Dylan Lyles, who'll be joining us shortly on the program. And, well, obviously you all are paying attention to the news, the horrific tragedy that we're seeing down in Houston, along with the beautiful expression of American exceptionalism being seen by people like, people that are joining the Cajun Navy, if you will. If you all are familiar with the Cajun Navy, it's been around for a while. Actually, it's a loosely knit organization, if you will. It's hard to even say it's an organization. There are people that are organizing this, including my good friend Rob Goday from the Cajun Relief Foundation, amongst others. There's other groups out there as well that fall under this banner called the Cajun Navy. I happen to participate with the Cajun Navy back, it's actually a little over a year ago here in Louisiana, which I think was a pretty fantastic experience for me. Obviously, other people had gone through some pretty terrible events with flooding in their homes. And I was able to participate in that and work with Rob and others. And really, really heart-touching events. We'll talk about that tonight on the Battlefield Live radio program. We'll also talk about the unnatural disaster that is progressive politicians, progressive activists, and what they are doing to this country and what it is that we have to do in order to eclipse that. That's right. We talked about the eclipse last week. Well, tonight on the battlefield, We're going to talk about what makes America exceptional. Stick with us on the Battlefield. We'll be right back after this short break on the Battlefield Live radio program, Liberty Eagle and Lanterns Media Network. Stick with us.
We're here to fix the machine.
Battlefield Live. You're listening to the Battlefield Live with Chris Puglia from Lanterns Media Network in the Battlefield Live radio program. Want to thank you for joining us on the Battlefield today. We got a great show lined up for you today. As usual, if you want to follow us, you can find us right now on the Liberty Eagle on Facebook. Just type in the Liberty Eagle. Make sure you follow the Liberty Eagle group. You also can go to Lanterns Buzz, 2 Z's, Lanterns Buzz on Facebook. We are live in both locations, as well as Twitter. Our Twitter handle is at Lanterns Buzz, and on YouTube. Just do a keyword search for Lanterns Buzz, and you can find us there. So with no further ado, I want to bring on my good friend and the guy that runs radio at Lanterns Radio Network. What's going on? Dylan Lyles, what's happening, man?
How you doing, boss man?
Oh, man.
Thank you for letting me be here, man.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on the show, man.
It's been a while.
Yeah, we've done some shows before, but it's actually been a while. Susan she's the battle axe. She's got some things to do tonight.
You don't, yeah. I can't. That's some shoes to fill. There's no way I could fill them, so I'm just gonna kind of leave them in the corner. I brought my own.
So one of the things, Dylan, obviously in the news right now is what is going on in the it's in Texas as well as in Louisiana. The storm Harvey, and a lot of people, if you all aren't from particular regions that experience hurricanes. It is something to be to experience, and I say that it's a perspective building experience. In other words, I don't wish that on anyone to have to go through the loss of personal items, whether it's a loss of wealth from not being able to go to work, or the worst thing would be the loss of a family member or a friend or just somebody in your community. And one of the things that we're seeing right now with the storm is an outpouring that I have actually been involved with before, and it's such a fulfilling thing. And look, a lot of people might look at what's going on in Houston and seeing the heroic people that are going into these flooded areas, rescuing people off of rooftops, and they're saying, wow, these are really, really heroes. And they are heroes. I don't want to take that away from them. But there's one thing that I've learned from doing this, and I mentioned this in the pre-show. We had a flood here about a year ago in Louisiana. I live close to Baton Rouge, in between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and there was a historic. They say it was a 1,000-year flood. Every flood seems to be a 1,000-year flood. I don't know if it was in fact a 1,000-year flood. Anyway, I joined a group and helped organize a group called the Cajun Navy, and many of you have probably seen this now. What's going on in Houston with the Cajun Navy. And look, the Cajun Navy actually somewhat existed before the flood even last year here in Baton Rouge area. But the reason why I'm mentioning this group is because it may seem like there's this big organization with all this money and funding, and people are flocking into with these specific plans, and they're professionals at doing this. Look, most of the people that I was, elbow to elbow with and were people just, getting their boat that they go fishing with on weekends, whether it was a flatboat or even some bay boats, and going into some of these neighborhoods, risking their lives, risking their property in order to be able to try to help people. And heroes they were. But what I gathered and gained from this was a perspective that I don't think I've ever experienced before, and that was the true meaning of what America is about. And it's more than just being heroic. It's about reaching out to your fellow community member and dropping any type of differences that you may have. You often hear from progressives about, eliminating classes, making things equal. When you're in the middle of a situation like that, all of a sudden you are on that same level. You're not, one person better than the other. And in some cases, our society has divided itself in those type of ways. And it's these type of events, I really do believe, bring us to a perspective that is needed. So Dylan, I don't know if you've ever experienced anything like this, or maybe it's just some little sense of charity that you've done. Can you kind of speak to that? Is that something that maybe you experienced?
Oh yeah, no, I live in North Carolina, and so we're very next to Florida. We're the most hit as far as hurricanes go from the Atlantic, and you want to talk about being in the middle of some stuff. Like I can remember, Hurricane Fran, Floyd, no, maybe not Floyd. I think Floyd, I was a little bit too old for that, but Hurricane Hugo, things of that nature. Man, I know it's like you said, it is not something you want to wish on anybody. It's probably if you've never been in a hurricane or through a hurricane or a typhoon or something along those lines, the best way to describe it is imagine a regular thunderstorm and multiply that by like 100.
Right.
Wind is blowing, everything's just everywhere, rain sideways, flood. It's
So, one of the things that, I often talk about Katrina, in fact, I did a show recently with Susan, and we brought our friend from Lanterns, Josie, on, and we talked about Katrina. And one of the things that we all mentioned, whether we're all experiencing different things. Josie experienced something that I couldn't imagine experiencing with Katrina, and one of the things that always comes back is that people really do become a part of humanity that we love to see. And look, I can say this. If there's anything that Americans do is we never run away from danger when it comes to saving lives and our fellow countrymen. If you look at what firemen do, and you look at what our policemen do, and you look at what our EMTs do, they run into the burning building. They run into the dangerous area in order to be able to help and save people. And I don't know that we see that in other countries. And I think that really what that does say about us is it goes down to the core of who we are. And it comes from, and I know there's going to be people that may, stick their nose up to this comment, but we have a Judeo-Christian value system here in the United States. It doesn't mean that all of us go to church. It doesn't mean that we all, worship Jesus Christ and, or we go to synagogue. What that means is the Judeo-Christian value system that the American system was built on, as well as the Enlightenment. It was about protecting what means the most to us. And the thing that means the most to us is in our founding document, the Declaration of Independence, is life. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There's a reason why life is first. And it's a part of our core. And I think a lot of us act on this, and we just don't really know where it comes from. And I think it's in our DNA as Americans. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I had mentioned earlier to a friend of mine today as bad off, and let me preface this by saying my heart and prayers and thoughts go out to the victims, the people who've lost lives during this horrible thing. The people who are displaced. It's not fun by any stretch of the imagination, but it is nice to not hear people bickering for a moment about, like you mentioned earlier, the priorities have now been realigned, at least momentarily. We don't know how long this is going to last.
Right.
Not just the storm and the effects of it. That'll be months, I believe. But I'm talking about the realignment of the priorities. I don't. Hopefully, it'll last a little bit longer. But it is nice to not hear people complaining to one another and trying to find an argument and find something to argue with the other person about.
Yeah, and look, people are going to politicize this. They've already tried to start doing it.
They already have.
I mean, the moment that Joel Osteen, and by all means, I'm no apologist for Joel Osteen, and quite honestly, I've seen him on Facebook, some images. People love to pick on Joel Osteen, and maybe he deserves some of it. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, they took out of this. I mean, we were still in the midst of a storm, a massive storm dropping trillions of gallons of water on the Houston and lower East Coast of Texas area, and people were trying to pick a fight on Christians. And and it's just, it always comes out at these times that this idea of the Judeo-Christian value system is one that is phony in some way. And look, I think that Joel Olstein, or Olston, I don't even know how to pronounce his name.
I think it's Olstein.
Yeah, I don't know if they're always looking for the guy that that it says to be a Christian that ends up doing something that's unchristian. And I hate to break it to people, is that Christians know that they are fallen. They know that they are sinners. And we all have issues. If you subscribe to being a Christian, it doesn't mean you're perfect. And so this goes back to this whole Saul Alinsky thing where, you know, even a Christian can't live up to his Christian potential. So let's pick on the people that are Christians, because we know that we can gain some political favor in that respect.
Oh yeah, and you get a couple wins on for your team. You know, a couple points scored.
Yes, and it's so sad because in perspective, if you look at what's taken place around the nation, whether it's what happened at Berkeley, whether it happened at Charlottesville, all these different places where the very you know, butt crust of the country is the best way I can explain it, gets together, and they flare up into this this violent you know, backlash. They are the 1% of the 1% of the radicals in this nation, and you see that, and you have endless spin after spin after spin in the media. And then you shift to an event like this, not a unnatural disaster like that, but a actual natural disaster where millions of people are affected and hundreds of thousands of people are reaching out to their fellow Americans. And where is the stories about that? No, it's about what Joel Olstein didn't do. He didn't open up the flooded doors to his church in order to let people in, and that becomes a story. Or the shoes that the FLOTUS is wearing because she's getting on a plane to go to a flood area, and they act like she has no other pair of shoes except the pumps she's wearing. You know, it's this type of stuff that just blows my mind, and it just completely solidifies the fact that the mainstream media's full attention is trying to figure out a way to tear down this nation, to tear down a president. And look, if Donald Trump didn't come down here, you know, one day after the storm, he came down here during the storm, first of all, which is dangerous as hell. If he would have waited to come, they would have been upset with him about that. If he would have never came, they would have got upset with him about that. You know, if they did what George Bush did, he flew over and they realized that it wasn't an opportunity to land, they'd have given him trouble about that. So it's all about these political points that the mainstream media and a lot of the left wing is trying to, you know, to punch at the American people and what's great about America. You know?
It's just I'm in the middle of kind of writing something right now, but the problem is like people are focusing on what everyone else is doing. You know, it used to be, you know, there was the keeping up with the Joneses. You had to have what the other person had.
Right.
You know, you had to have that new car. You had to have that new house. You had to, and apparently now, and this is just purely my observation, but America has become so prosperous, and we've come so far since even the 80s when I were, you know, come along and everything. Now it's no longer we're trying to keep up with the Joneses. Now we're trying to be better than the Joneses.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's well, what are they doing? How are they behaving? And we've stopped worrying about my responsibilities, my circle of responsibility, as it were, and I'm worrying about everything else. And it's just when you stick your nose in someone else's business, you kind of lose track of, you know, keeping your own house clean. And
that's a very, very, very interesting take, and I want to kind of talk about that on the back half of the break. So let's do this, Dylan. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to dig into a little bit of that. I also want to dig into this whole idea of, you know, the natural disaster versus the unnatural disaster. We'll talk about that on the Battlefield Live radio program. Chris Pilier and Dylan Lyles from Lanterns Media Network and the Liberty Eagle. Stick with us. We'll be right back after this short pause.
Lanterns illuminating the truth.
People often ask me, they say, Chris, how is it that we can change the minds of many in this country? And I say, well, you first don't start with the mind. You have to start with the heart. You don't change minds without changing hearts. And that's what we're going to do. It wasn't that long ago that you might have not have had hope for the country, and all of a sudden you have a change of heart. We'll expect that other people right now feel the same way that you used to. It's those people that we have to reach out to. It may be you that we have to reach out to. So it's our task to form a community, a group, unified behind principles, unified behind what has made America the country that it is now. It's about liberty. It's about freedom. And everybody wants to experience this. We just have to show them how. It's about you being a lantern shining out the light of truth. And we can bring this all together in one place. It's truly about the shining city on the hill. Hope is not in the hands of someone else. It's within ourselves. It's within our hearts. It's within our minds. And it's about utilizing those things in order to be able to make us free.
Lanterns illuminating the truth. Battlefield Live.
Chris Pillier, Lanterns Media Network. Thank you for joining us on the battlefield. Still got a lot of show left for you today. Folks, if you've never heard of this program or seen this program, welcome. Welcome to the battlefield. This is the battlefield of ideas. We like to go back and forth with some ideas and see what makes sense. And with me today is Mr. Dylan Lyles from the Defenders of American Exceptionalism radio program from Lanterns Media Network. Dylan, where can everybody find you on social media?
You can find us at Defenders of American Exceptionalism on Facebook. Twitter is at DOAE Show. I think that's all we got right now. We're kind of trying to maintain everything. We have a Patreon page, but it's not exactly finishing up yet, so I'm not gonna throw that out there right now.
Well, Go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, but the main ones we're biggest on is Facebook and Twitter. I usually control the Facebook side of it, and Steven handles the Twitter, but we both have full interaction to it. And
all right.
So,
well, folks, if you want to listen to, Dylan's just on one of many shows on Lanterns Media Network. And look, I want to mention also the Liberty Eagle. They got a lot of shows as well that they do on Facebook Live. If you want to find some of the Lantern shows, you can go to lanterns.buzz, our website, lanterns.buzz. You can also find us on Spreaker.com. Just do a keyword search for Lanterns Buzz. You can also find us on Facebook at Lanterns Buzz, where we are Facebook Live right now. We're also on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, Player.fm, SoundCloud, and, of course, you can find us on Twitter at Lanterns Buzz. And if you're
don't forget
iHeartRadio. Yeah, you know what? I have to put that down because I
That's
always
a big
forget.
one, man. That was my biggest accomplishment on this, is helping us to get there, dude.
That's right. Dylan has gotten our radio show host on iHeartRadio. It is awesome to see the talent that we're affiliated with. Folks, you can also donate to our program as well as to Lanterns Media Network at patreon.com/lanterns. So I want to dig right back into this, Lantern. You mentioned earlier before the break. You mentioned, how the American people have really come through on doing what we do best, right?
Yep.
And one of the things that I was thinking about when all of this was starting to transpire, everybody was shifting from this. Everybody was drunk, I guess, on the whole eclipse thing, and it just seemed to me that this storm seemed to eclipse, if you will, all of the things in the media, whether it was, you know, all the supposed the outgrowth of neo-Nazis all over the country, like it was some kind of, you know, crazy you know, they came out of the woodwork type of deal, when it was a, you know, very small amount of people. The media were trying to blow it out of proportion. All of a sudden, the media has something else that they just have to cover. You know, they were having so much fun, you know, with the class warfare stuff, that they had to talk about, you know, something that was really meaningful, which was the lives of people that were in danger with this huge storm. And of course, you know, you have the people that have been coming out talking about it being global warming and all of this crap. Up until yesterday, this storm was not the biggest storm that we've had in record. Okay, and in record, our records only go back like 100 years. Okay, so just think about, you know, I don't know what is it, 400 million years the Earth's been here. I don't even know what the it's something crazy,
something
number.
like that.
Yeah, something that we can't fathom, like I don't know, like the national debt. You just can't fathom it, right? But the thing is that hey Becky from North Carolina, as well as Wendy. Look, I forgot to mention all of our folks that are watching us on Liberty Eagle. I got to do that before we go any further. Wendy and Linda and Don and David, Karen, Patrick, Mike, Kathy, Deborah, all of the folks there. Thank you for helping us out, sharing the program, get as many people here on the battlefield. But to me, it was just, you know, it's this. I think it was 1935. There was a storm that had, I think, 50 inches of rain. This one will have north, I believe, of 50 inches of rain, which is the record. So, you know, that was back, you know, in the 1930s when we had, you know, SUVs and we had, you know, everybody had computers and internet, and it was burning up, you know, with the climate change, right? I mean, at least that's what they keep saying, is that climate change has created this storm. I've also listened to some meteorologists and climatologists that have talked about this particular event, and they said that this event was actually predictable. That the weather patterns that led up to this storm have been because of a number of things, including the low-pressure system, obviously that is the storm, the high-pressure system to the northeast, or northwest rather, and the southeast that kind of held this storm where it was, and then the way that the jet stream was. So all these factors are things that are predictable. The storm in 35 was similar to this one, where it was a similar event. And so they keep these models, and they watch these models, and as the years progress, they can watch these different models and say, you know what, this year looks a lot like 1935, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that you're going to hear come out of this particular event, when people start putting their lives together, which is going to take years. In fact, the storm that took place here a year ago, which was arguably the biggest flood I'd ever seen in my life. And I would say that it's not quite as big as the one that we see here in Texas, but it was very, very large. People are still putting their lives back together a year later. You drive through New Orleans East since Katrina, which Katrina was 2005. There's still places that have not rebuilt since Katrina, right? So the point I'm trying to get at is that while, you know, the news cycle kind of finds that it's bored with this particular event, they'll start bringing out the people about the global warming and all this crap, and it'll eventually be, you know, that global warming is what caused this. Your SUV, you Americans, have caused this event, and it will be something that, you know, the talking heads will be talking and fighting about, trying to create their ratings. Don't you think that's what's going to happen?
Oh, it's already started in a lot of cases. I saw and I should have had it prepped and ready to go, but I'd seen the Huffington Post just today put out a thing, some kind of an article trying to say how, you know, scientists have done specialties and it was all because of climate change that this storm happened and it was the worst ever and blah, 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 blah. And I'm telling you, it's funny how the media likes to over dramatize everything. Right. Everything is the absolute worst ever. Well, like you said, we've only really been keeping records for about 100 years, you know, so we don't know what was going on before that. You can't. They're just trying to politicize things to their benefit, and unfortunately, you have people out there who fall for it. And it's sad because you try to talk to him and they go, well, he's a scientist. He knows. Well, not really.
Right.
That doesn't, just because you're a scientist, you paid all that money for schooling, doesn't mean your elbow from, a pen on your desk.
Right. So one of the things that Wendy's actually mentioned, that there was the Galveston hurricane in the 1900s. And these storms come and go. These are things that we see. They always call them the 1,000-year storm and all of that crap. Sandy was one of those. It was Katrina. Then they had, I don't know, what was the ones they had before that? They had Andrew. They had Rita, which hit Texas. They had Camille, Betsy.
Fran hit our coast, the North Carolina. You had Hugo back in the late 80s, early 90s. Andrew. There was just all kinds of. Storms. Newsflash, folks. Storms have been hitting and going on around the world long before anybody was born, long before they had the technology to detect it,
right.
Long before these guys got, spent all their money on this education, and will be here long after we're all dead and gone.
Right. Yeah, the Earth's, 4 billion years old or something like that. It's probably in a couple storms.
Something like that. Yeah, at least one or two.
But I think in perspective, with this particular event, if you look at the amount of people that are engaged in this event, this truly to me is what America's about. And I think that this is really what's so sad about this particular event. Obviously, the loss of lives, the loss of property, and things of that nature. Those things are sad, but really the sad thing is the missed opportunity by the media, by people all around this nation to really experience what it is that has made America exceptional. So let's do this, Dylan. We're going to take one more break, and when we come back, I want to dig into some of the stuff that's been going on with Antifa, the stuff that's that really is, to me, the true disaster in this nation, and as the people that are trying to tear it down. Stick with us on the Battlefield, folks. We'll be right back after the short pause on the Battlefield Live radio program.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz. For great radio, get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Battlefield Live.
When the federal government that is intended to protect the people grows and grows and grows out of control and spreads across the boundaries that are put on it by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, this is what happens. All of the good intentions that have been put into the NSA and all of these different agencies and all these different tentacles of the Leviathan that we call the federal government, they're now being used against us. The good intentions have bled out. Now they become arms of political power. So as the Trump administration's coming in and the Obama administration's going out, the Obama administration used tactics in order to try to undermine and delegitimize Donald Trump. Whether you like Donald Trump or not, whether you're an Obama supporter or not, think about that for a moment. That your tax dollars, your rights that you have given to the government, for the most part, in order to so-called, quote-unquote, protect you from evil terrorists, have been used against you, the American people. And just because you didn't support Trump doesn't mean that it doesn't affect you. Because guess what? The next guy that comes into office, and he's a Democrat or a progressive, what do you think Donald Trump's going to do? If he's got his establishment out there. I'm not saying he's going to do it, but he could, and there's precedent for it. If we don't talk about this right now, and we don't get our federal government in order, this is going to continue. It's only going to get worse.
Lanterns changing hearts to change minds.
Lanterns illuminating the truth.
Battlefield Live, Chris Pilier, Lanterns Media Network. Thank you for joining us on the battlefield today. So, folks, I want to give you all a little bit of perspective here, a little bit of history, I guess you will. Some comments going on back and forth in the Liberty Eagle Facebook page group. If you all will, please share this particular video if you're on Facebook, either at Lanterns Buzz or on the Liberty Eagle. Share it so we can all get everybody on the battlefield of ideas. And there's a comment that was made that this particular storm was a man-made disaster. Let's talk about some history here, okay? If you all remember back in 1963, you know, way back when, there was a storm, let's see, I think it was called Hurricane Flora, that actually put 100 inches of rain in Cuba. 100 inches of rain in Cuba. That's twice what we saw in Houston. 1963. You know, when they had like the Ford Expedition in the Suburban. Yeah. Okay, so but what the person that's commented in the post here has basically said, and I'll challenge her on this. And by all means, if you can show us some evidence, and I won't call the person out, but if they want to show some evidence, we'll be willing to see this. What Cuba's you know, their real conservative leader, Hugo Chavez, or not Hugo Chavez. That's the other conservative leader that had died.
It was the other one, yeah.
It was the other one. Who was the other one? Joseph Stalin. Stalin. No, not Joseph Stalin. Not Joseph. It was Hitler. No, not Hitler. It was the other.
Che. Was it Che?
No, not Che. Not Che. It was what is his? Oh,
right on the tip of my tongue.
Right on the tip of my tongue. Mr. Fidel Castro.
That's it.
Yeah, Fidel Castro said that the United States was engineering the weather, in that we were engineering in the weather and we tried to destroy Cuba with the weather. And so people wonder about all of this progressive crap that we hear about us engineering the weather. Let's wake up for a moment here. We are but a pimple on the earth and in the history of Earth. And we are going to be a pimple that will one day pop because of some freak event, like maybe an asteroid hitting the planet, maybe the sun blowing up. I don't know. But the bottom line is the idea that we can control the atmosphere and the climate is just complete ignorant, okay? Yeah. Harp made me do it. Wendy comments. It's funny. So if you ever get in an airplane and you fly over the Earth, because that's what you're doing. You're flying over the Earth, and you look out of the window. You don't see but little bitty specks that look like homes, that look like maybe a building. We are a pimple on the Earth, okay? In fact, you have all of these idiots out there that say things like, oh, yeah, you know, overpopulation, we're going to completely overpopulate the Earth and all this crap. You could take every human being in this earth and put them in Texas, and the rest of the world would be unpopulated. That's how much of a small pimple we are on the butt of the earth. Wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There are, again, you're talking about it. Like I was, while we were on break and you were talking, I went and looked, and I couldn't find that Huffington Post thing I'd found earlier. But you want to talk about craziness that had come out. Not only was it man-made,
right,
this particular hurricane, but according to the Huffington Post, it was also racist.
Right. Yes.
Because, you know, the poor non-white people are hit the hardest, and Harvey is no different. It singled them out because hurricanes are apparently racist.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know that.
Well, I mean, all you have to do is go turn the television on, and you see that there are white people that are in boats that are being rescued by people. And they could be black people. They could be yellow people. They could be green people. I don't know. I mean, maybe they're having. Look, there was a funny video that I saw, and he had this serious this lady. You know, she was from the local news or whatever, and she's talking about the tragedy that is the storm, and she's talking about the harsh conditions and all this, which they are harsh conditions. I'm just kind of patronizing this woman. Goes nuts. She looks over and she says, "Look at these individuals. They're sharing a little cap of water out of this water bottle. It was a bottle of Sky vodka." You know, I mean, just the sheer absurdity of. I mean, look, while these events they really bring out the beauty in people, there are some cuckoos that come out of the woods. You know what I'm saying?
I'd appreciate the guy was sharing his vodka. Had I been in that situation, I don't know if I would be sharing with anyone.
Yeah. Yeah, I need all the vodka I can get in that event.
Hell, leave me alone.
But look, there's this whole debate that's going on right now. And Dylan, I think you and I talked about this before. You got the alt-right, and what some are calling, I hate the fact that they're even saying it, the alt-left. Because all of these things, these alts, if it says alt, it's left. Alt-right means left. This idea that we're engineering the planet's weather patterns is no different than we're engineering it through global warming. These are all progressive ideas that seem to think that we can develop some type of technology, or we can just be so careless to destroy the planet. The planet has been here for billions of years. It's going to be here for probably another billion of years, and we're just a brief smidge on the planet. And we can choose to live with each other or not. And I think that's the lesson here. I think that there's so much that is going on, and that we can try to figure out the socialist BS like Wendy's talking about on the Facebook page. We could talk about all this socialist stuff, because the socialist stuff is the true disaster.
Yep.
You know, I don't know how many of you all that are listening actually take a look at what's going on in Venezuela. Venezuela is arguably one of the richest nations in regards to natural resources. Resources. Oil. They have billions and billions of barrels of oil under their feet. And they're eating out of garbage cans. They can't figure out how to purchase toilet paper. There's hyperinflation. Why? Not because of some storm that blew over over the coastline, but rather the storm that has become their reality, which is socialism. And I think that when we look to this class warfare crap, like the storm is a racist storm, and the fact that global warming exists, the fact that, the rich people are taking advantage of the poor people, or otherwise known as the bourgeoisie against the proletariat, the communist crap. If we look at these things, the true disasters that we've seen in history with the most deaths are not hurricanes, are not earthquakes, they're not tsunamis, but rather they are socialism with mass genocide and starvation and death. Utter destruction of humankind has come from the hands of men. Yep. And that's the true natural, or I should say unnatural, disaster that we need to try to prevent, because we can. We can't stop hurricanes.
Yep.
We can't stop earthquakes. We can't stop tsunamis, and we can't create them. Mrs. Alex Jones in drag. We can't do that. We can only prevent the natural disasters, or the unnatural disasters, rather, that are created by men. And we're seeing this all over the place. And there are people that are trying to bring it on. The Antifa groups, the neo-Nazis. Neo-Nazis are not alt-right people. They are left-wing American people, or they're right-wing European people, like they were in the Nazi era. So Dylan, I just think that the frustration that at least I feel, and I'm sure that many other Americans feel, is that we have completely lost grip, which really, truly important in the country, about what it is that we can do and what can't do in order to create a civil society for us to live amongst. Would you, am I missing the boat here? Is there something that I'm missing?
No, I'm with you on that. We've lost sight. I have been flipping through, and one of the things I read today was a quote by MLK, which basically said that, quote, there's some good in the worst of us and some evil in the best of us. And when we discover this, we are less prone to hate our enemies.
Wow.
And that's something we've all forgotten, that there are people who, for some reason, and it could be boredom. I personally, I want to say it's boredom. Like I said earlier, America has actually come so far technologically and everything. I mean, Americans have prospered way more since, the early to mid 80s than we have in a very long time. And I think people have just gotten so comfortable. They have nothing better to do.
Right.
Then just stick their nose into somebody else's business. And like the old adage is, the idle hands is the devil's work.
Yes.
I think, honest to God, that you people are just so upset and so bored and have no meaning, or feel they don't have a meaning for themselves. They've never been told by somebody else that, hey, you can be productive and not be a drain. And they start arguing, and they make things like, the eclipse and the hurricane are racist, and all this stupidness just to feel like they have a purpose in life. And then I think there might be also a little bit of an issue when it comes to social media and technology, because everyone is trying to find their 10 minutes of fame.
Right.
And if they can, if they can attack somebody, or if they can say the right comment at the right moment, then it's going to go viral. And even if it's for a day, they have that time of their celebrity. And I think they're really trying to get that. And they don't care, consequences be damned.
You know what? You made a good point, and this is actually the point that I was trying to remember earlier. You had talked about what the people going through in Houston, as well as in other places. And we always say Houston. There's a lot of areas that are being affected, even outside of Houston. Like Port Arthur has been completely submerged underwater, Beaumont and other places, and even some places in Louisiana. But one of the things that I've been doing a lot of thinking about, and I've been actually listening to, and if you all listened to this program before, you've heard me talk about Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson is a psychoanalyst. He's a clinical psychologist. And by all means, if you know anything, I've written an entire book to talk about the destruction of the American way of life because of German existentialism and things like that. So it was a very, very big challenge for me to listen to a clinical psychologist on some of the things that we're experiencing. And one of the things that he made an incredible statement, and it's something that's been obvious to me, and I just really couldn't figure out a way to explain it, is that we all suffer. Our nature as human beings is suffering. At the moment we are born, we begin to die. And it's hard to think about that, because it's gut-wrenching to think about the fact that we struggle every single day. Every single day we have bad things that happen to us. In some cases, there are horrific things that happen to us. But to your point that we may get bored, I agree with that, but I also think that we have such, and you mentioned this too, and I want to expand on it, is the prosperity that we have in this nation. We don't know what true suffering is.
Nope.
If you want to go and figure out go see what's happening in Zimbabwe with hyperinflation, where there's $1 trillion tender. In other words, you can go get $1 trillion bill. Okay, and then you can go buy groceries with it. Or if you go to Venezuela, they have had like 500% inflation or something to that effect. There's people eating out of garbage cans. People that are going to restaurants and standing outside of restaurants waiting for the garbage to be put out so they can eat the rinds of oranges and things of that nature. People that are selling their children and themselves into to brothels in order to be able to make a living. These type of things, we think we suffer when we lose a job, or we get in a car accident, or something like that. That when we say American exceptionalism, American exceptionalism has given us the ability to have a condition of life that we've never seen in humankind before. And you are absolutely right when you say that we become bored, and that we have, and it's events like this, the hurricane, that we see true suffering, or at least a glimpse of it, where people lose their $150,000, $200,000 home, where they submerge their $50,000, $60,000 BMW, or or someone loses their life. When we look at history, when we see that 100 million people have been killed by communism all around the world, over in the 21st or 20th century rather, that to me is suffering that we can never never imagine. Hopefully, we'll never be able to. We'll never experience this. I'm reading a book right now, Dylan. It's called, and I can never pronounce it. And many of you may have heard this book before, and I never read it. It's by Solzhenitsyn. It's called the Gulag Archipelago. I can never pronounce it right. I'm a good old stupid boy from the South. But this particular book this was written by Solzhenitsyn, who arguably was the guy that pretty much almost single-handedly outside of Reagan that took down the Soviet Union, because he opened the books on what communism, which is really just socialism, does to a country. And so suffering, true suffering, is what we'll see in this nation if people that are in the groups like Antifa get their way. If people like the neo-Nazis get their way, they'll have a different type of socialism, national socialism, as Wendy had correctly stated earlier in the Liberty Eagle Facebook page. So Dylan, we got about 8 more minutes. I want to talk to you actually about some of the things that you've been talking about on your program. I find that first of all, your program is entertaining. I try to live up to that. Try to be funny. So what is it that you and your co-host, if you could introduce everybody, your co-host, what do you all cover on your show usually?
Yes. Okay. So I and my co-host Stephen Airy, what we do is we try to we come from an angle of I'm gonna start this back from the beginning. So if you listen to shows, and it's any show, you run the risk and of having very opinionated, Trump is the greatest thing since sliced bread, or Trump is Satan incarnate, and you have these factions, and you have this split. And Stephen and I had sat down when he came on with me, and we decided that we didn't want to have anything like that anymore. We wanted to have a show that pointed out the obvious, kind of bring things back to God's law and nature's law. The stuff that we can all sit and commonly agree on. You know what I mean? You can argue about what level it is, but we can all agree, I think, that a lie is wrong.
Right.
You know what I mean? What level you and I may be, might differ, but a lie is a lie. Murder is wrong. All of that's wrong. And that's what we try to do, is we go through and we will find, sometimes we take a topic like this past week we tried to basically express to people that, like with meeting of Antifa and places like that, they're talking about being oppressed. The statues coming out. Oh, we're oppressed by this stuff.
No idea what oppression is.
We went over the stats of real oppression.
Right.
That slavery is still active today, and it has been far worse now than it has ever been in human history.
Right.
And we went through all the stats, the percentages of just how horrific this stuff is, and that's the kind of thing that Stephen and I try to do. I'll give you my opinion, but in the grand scheme of it all, and Stephen will give his opinion, but in the grand scheme of it all, what we try to do is point out the obvious of, hey, folks, red flag, this is wrong, and here's why it's wrong, and bring it back to those core values. And if you want to compartmentalize it or whatever in your own little world and your own experiences, that's fine. But we feel we've got to get back to common principles again.
You know what? I think when listening to your show, as well as what I try to do here on the battlefield with Susan, is that I think one of the things that we suffer as Americans, and it actually goes back to your other comment about the prosperity and the boredom and things of that nature, social media. I mean, for the most part, and I tell my son this all the time, he's always on Snapchat and all. I say, nobody posts things they don't want people to see.
Yep.
In other words, they're not posting the suffering that they're having. So we get this perception, right? We have a perception issue. Everything is reality television in our world. Mm-hmm. Everybody has a persona that they try to present, and I find that people are really having trouble gaining perspective, whether it's having just natural conversation with people. It's, I can't tell you how many times, especially with younger guys that I work with, I'm an old fart, right? So I go to the restaurant with some of the guys that I work with, and sometimes they'll be sitting there on their phone, and it's like, come on, guys, let's just have a conversation. And, and look, I am a social media guy. I love social media. I'm not saying bad things about social media.
For the most part. I mean, it's
We need it. But the
Yeah.
but the thing is that I think that we suffer from a perspective issue. And
Yep.
I think what I'm trying to do on the battlefield with Susan, as well as what you're trying to do, and I think a lot of it, people at Lanterns as well as on the Liberty Eagle, what we're trying to do is trying to bring perspective. I think that's what we need is perspective. And talking about things like you said about Antifa and the oppression, that goes along with things like what true suffering really is.
Yep.
We're not suffering just because I don't get to eat my, my ho-hos and drink my little cappuccino at college, and and I really have to, when I get out of college, I got to go get a job that one is not going to be dropped in my lap. Oh, woe is me. I can no longer sell my record, at the record store. I actually have to try to perform, like these artists out there that whine and cry because the record industry sucks because of capitalism, when they actually have to truly perform instead of just creating a record. I mean, there's just so much out there that our system of government, at least the way it was intended to be, our beliefs, our principles, what's truly made America exceptional, those things I think that we have to return to, but we also have to gain perspective of what it could be like. What it could be like to have what Antifa wants, which is we don't have a freedom of speech, that we are bludgeoned with a club every time we say something that they do not like, or that we're completely ridiculed and tarred and feathered in the public square by the left, by the pink pea hat wearing idiots, all that stuff. We just, the perspective is what we need to bring. And the hard part is that we have the younger generation that has been saturated with this socialist bullcrap.
Yep.
And we have to break them of this. And when they come into the workplace, and I work with some of them, okay? And maybe not necessarily in this particular place that I'm at now. If there's people listening, I don't want them to think that I'm talking about that. But people that I interface with in some of the locations that I work, I mean, they have this entitlement mentality. And that's not what the real world is about. You don't get corn by just saying, I want corn. You have to till the fields. And some years, guess what? The plants just suck. You don't get what you want all the time. You have to work for it. And that's truly, I think, if we can get back to that, if we can get back to basics, I think that's truly when America becomes great again. We got just a moment left, Dylan. What's your final thoughts?
Well, I was going to say, I like where you're going with it, because we have to go back. Like you said, we have to go back to those points. And in order to do that, I think parents need to go back to being parents. America, as for all the prosperity that we have, we've gotten to a point to where we keep chasing for more. And so the normal family structure is gone, and we've left it up to the state to turn around and raise our kids in every level. And it's gone to now the schools are telling you, well, you can't, let's stamp out bullying by using words instead of, teaching kids to learn to adapt or just to not be that way or whatever. We avoid, we have to have safe spaces, and we have to have all of this stuff. And from the beginning, these kids are taught all this stuff, and then they get out in the real world, and all the parents are going, well, what happened? I don't understand. It's because real fast, I took my oldest son out of school. We started homeschooling him.
Right.
For this very reason, is 8 to 10 hours a day, he's under their control. He is taught all the global warming stuff, all that crap, and we have him for maybe 4 hours.
Right.
And
that's
we said
true.
we couldn't do that no more.
Very true.
And that's what we need to fix.
So, folks, I want to thank you all for joining us on the battlefield. It's a pleasure to have Dylan on the program. Dylan, thank you for joining me on the battlefield from the Defenders of American Exceptionalism radio program on Lanterns Media Network. We'll try to see about getting you on the Liberty Eagle. I'm sure Blair would love to have you. Folks, if you enjoyed the show, make sure you find us at Lanterns Buzz. Just do a keyword search, Lanterns Buzz, on Facebook and Twitter. You can also find us at YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, Player.fm, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and you can find us at patreon.com/lanterns. And you can follow me at Paul Revere again. Thank you for joining us, Dylan. Appreciate it. We'll talk to y'all later. Tighter.